Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into chapter 9 of First Corinthians.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one.
It really is. Our goal here is to unpack what this chapter tells us about freedom, rights, and, well, dedication when you're really pursuing something important, like sharing a message.
And it offers this perspective that's, well, honestly pretty surprising. It kind of flips the script on what we think about entitlement.
Right, so the writer, Paul, he's talking to the church in Corinth, and he's defending himself, his choices.
Exactly, and the tension is right there. He knows he has rights, legitimate ones, but he's choosing not to use them, and we need to figure out why.
Okay, so let's start where he starts. Verses 1 to 6. He really comes out swinging, asserting his status.
Oh, absolutely. It's like rapid-fire questions. Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Haven't I seen Jesus? He's putting his credentials right on the table.
No messing around. And his proof isn't some abstract thing, is it?
No, not at all. He points straight at the Corinthians. He says, aren't you the result of my work? You're the seal, the proof of my apostleship.
Wow. So basically, look in the mirror. That's my evidence.
Pretty much. It's a powerful argument. Your existence as a church proves my legitimacy.
And based on that status, he then lists what he's actually entitled to.
Yeah, he lays out these rights very clearly. The right to food and drink support for his work.
Okay.
The right to bring along a believing wife, just like he says. The other apostles, the Lord's brothers, even Cephas Peter.
Right. That's a specific detail.
And, maybe importantly for the context, the right not to have to earn a living through other work, unlike what he and Barnabas were apparently doing at the time.
He's making it clear this is my defense to those judging me. He knows his rights.
He absolutely does. And that sets up the next bit perfectly, verses 7 to 14, where he argues why people doing this kind of work deserve support.
Right. He uses these really everyday examples.
Yeah, things everyone would get, like who joins the army and pays their own way? Nobody.
Or plants a vineyard and doesn't expect to eat the grapes.
Exactly. Or tends a flock and doesn't drink the milk. It's just common sense, basic fairness.
Then he brings in the law of Moses.
That verse. Do not muzzle an ox while it's treading out the grain.
Which, might make you pause. Is God really worried about oxen getting snacks?
Huh. Well, that's kind of the point he makes. He immediately asks, is it about oxen? God is concerned and answers himself. Surely he says this for us.
Ah, okay. So the principle behind the ox rule is broader.
Precisely. He says it was written for their sake, the plowman, the thresher they work, hoping to get a share of the harvest. The principle is, labor deserves reward.
Got it. So the ox isn't the point, the principle is. And he applies that directly to spiritual work.
Yep. If we've sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we reap a material harvest? He's drawing a direct parallel. Spiritual labor should reasonably expect material support.
He backs this up further, too.
He does. He points to temple workers that get food from the temple. Those serving at the altar share in the offerings. It's an established practice.
So there's precedent within their own religious context.
Right. And then he delivers the final word on it, really. He says, in the same way, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel.
A direct command. So it's not just his opinion or logical deduction. He's saying Jesus himself ordered this.
So the case is closed.
Yeah.
Right? He has the rights, clearly justified, which makes what comes next even more striking.
Exactly. This is the pivot, verse 15. After all that justification, he just states it flat out, but I have not used any of these rights.
Boom. That's the paradox right there. He argues forcefully for a right, then says, yeah, but I don't use it.
And he feels strongly about this. He says, I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of this boast. What boast?
Not the boast of having rights, but the boast of not taking payment from them, the Corinthians. It's about choosing not to exercise his entitlement for a specific reason.
Rather die. That's intense language. Why give up something he's clearly entitled to?
He tells us, we put up with anything rather than hinder the gospel of Christ. That's the key.
Ah. So taking money, even rightfully, could somehow get in the way of the message itself.
Apparently that was his concern in this specific context. Maybe it could look like he was in it for the money or create some kind of barrier or obligation, whatever it was. He saw it as a potential hindrance, and the message was more important.
Okay, that makes sense. The mission comes first. He also talks about his preaching being, well, not really a choice.
Yeah, that's in verse 16. When I preach the gospel, I cannot boast, for I am compelled to preach. It's like a duty laid on him.
Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. It sounds like an unstoppable force for him.
It does. He sees it as a trust committed to me. It's not a job he applied for. It's an obligation he has to fulfill.
So if he's compelled to preach, and those who preach have a right to support, but he chooses not to take that support, what's his reward? What's in it for him?
And this is another one of those surprising twists. Verse 18. His reward is just this, that in preaching the gospel I may offer it free of charge, and so not make use of my rights.
Wait, his reward is not using his rights.
Exactly. His reward is the act of giving the gospel freely. That act of voluntary self-limitation, of not taking what he could have, that is his unique reward in this situation. It completely reframes what reward means.
That really turns things upside down. Freedom isn't grabbing your rights, it's choosing when not to, for a higher reason.
You got it. And this focus, avoiding hindrance, offering freely, leads him to this other strategy he describes, starting in verse 19, this idea of a radical adaptability.
Right, he starts again, though I am free and belong to no man.
But then, immediately,
I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. Free, yet a slave.
it sounds contradictory, but it's a metaphor, right? He's saying he willingly restricts his own freedom, his preferences, his cultural comfort zone, to connect with people where they are.
And he gives specific examples. To the Jews, I became like a Jew.
To those under the law, I became like one under the law. Even though he clarifies he isn't strictly under it himself in the same way.
To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. Again, qualifying he's still under Christ's law. To the weak, I became weak.
He's meeting people on their terms. It's not about compromising core beliefs, but about approach, method, removing unnecessary cultural or social barriers that his own background or even his rights might create.
And the goal driving all this shape-shifting.
It's crystal clear, so that by all possible means I might save some. It's entirely mission-driven.
I do all this for the sake of the gospel. That's his constant refrain.
Every adaptation is strategic, aimed at getting the message across effectively. It's not about being popular. It's about effectiveness for the gospel's sake.
Okay, so he has rights, chooses not to use them for the mission, adapts radically to connect with people. What kind of personal toll or discipline does this take?
Well, he addresses that directly with some really vivid metaphors in verses 24 to 27. He uses sports analogies, the Greek games.
The race. All the runners run, but only one gets the prize. Run in such a way as to get the prize. So it requires focus, effort, intent.
And intense training. Everyone who competes goes into strict training. He says they do it for a perishable crown, like a wreath.
Right.
But we, he implies, are striving for an imperishable one. So shouldn't our training, our discipline, be even more rigorous?
Makes sense. And he says his own effort isn't just flailing around.
No, he's not running aimlessly or boxing like a man beating the air. It's purposeful, targeted.
So what's the point of all these athletic pictures?
It boils down to self-discipline. Intense self-control. He says, I beat my body and make it my slave.
Which sounds harsh, but it's metaphorical, right?
Yeah, it's about bringing everything, desires, impulses, comfort, maybe even those rights he talked about under strict control for the sake of the goal. Discipline his whole self.
Like an athlete denies themselves things to win.
Exactly. And why does he do this? The final verse gives the ultimate reason. So that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize.
Wow. So his own discipline is tied to his integrity, the mission's success, and his own ultimate standing. He holds himself to that standard.
It's a powerful image of someone completely dedicated, willing to sacrifice personal entitlements, adapt in extreme ways, and maintain rigorous self-discipline, all focused on one single overriding purpose.
What really comes through is that connection between his view of freedom, which includes the freedom not to exercise rights, and the demands of his mission.
It's all interwoven.
Yeah.
The rights, the sacrifice, the adaptability, the discipline. It's one coherent picture driven by the gospel.
So wrapping up this deep dive into 1 Corinthians 9, we saw Paul lay out his rights really clearly.
Rights he was fully entitled to.
Then the big surprise, choosing not to use them, specifically to avoid hindering the message. His reward was actually in giving it freely.
That radical adaptability, too, becoming all things to all people, not as a people pleaser, but as a strategy to connect and save some.
And finally, those intense athletic metaphors underlining the personal discipline required. Running to win, training hard, controlling himself.
So he wouldn't be disqualified after telling others how to run the race.
It definitely challenges the simple idea that freedom just means demanding everything you're entitled to.
It suggests a different kind of freedom, maybe. The freedom found in self-limitation for a purpose you see as vitally important.
Absolutely. So, as you think about this deep dive, how does Paul's intense focus, his willingness to forego rights and embrace discipline for his goal, how does that challenge your own ideas about freedom, rights, and what you'd sacrifice for something you truly believe in?
That's definitely something to reflect on.